Think about the last time you went out of your way to help someone only to be ignored, walked over, or even taken for granted. It hurts, doesn't it? The truth is, your kindness, your heart, your empathy, your generosity can sometimes make people disrespect you. But why? And more importantly, how do you stop it without losing who you are? Today, I'm going to reveal the hidden reasons your good heart is being exploited and show you how to protect yourself while staying kind, powerful, and respected. Kindness without boundaries invites disrespect. This is one of those truths that so many people fail to understand until they've experienced it firsthand. When you are kind without thinking about limits, without considering the effects on yourself, you are opening a door that not everyone has honorable intentions to walk through. Human beings are wired to recognize weakness, not always in physical form, but in emotional and psychological form. Kindness, when offered without boundaries, can be perceived as a form of vulnerability, and not everyone reacts to vulnerability with empathy or care. Some react with opportunism. They see the open heart and think, this person will give me what I want, no matter the cost. They do not see your generosity as a virtue. They see it as a tool they can use to their advantage. It's not that kindness is bad. On the contrary, kindness is one of the highest expressions of character, but when it is unchecked, it becomes a signal that can be misread by the wrong people. Every time you say yes to something that stretches you too thin, every time you give more than you can afford emotionally, mentally, or physically, you are setting a precedent for how others treat you. Boundaries are not walls. They are the parameters that define your kindness. Without these parameters, people begin to test the edges of your generosity, and over time, they push past those edges. You may start noticing patterns. Friends who only come around when they need something, coworkers who dump their responsibilities on you, family members who constantly call on your emotional energy without reciprocation. Each of these examples is a reflection of what happens when kindness is given without limits. And it is important to note that this is not always malicious intent. Sometimes people simply do not recognize the weight of what they are taking. But that does not change the fact that ultimately it is your energy, your resources, and your emotional well-being that are being drained. A lack of boundaries in kindness communicates that your needs are secondary to everyone else's, whether intentionally or not. And this sets up a dynamic where respect becomes conditional on what you give rather than who you are. People start to associate you with availability rather than value, with service rather than presence. In social psychology, there is a concept called the door in the face phenomenon, where compliance is obtained by asking for something large, expecting refusal, and then asking for something smaller. When kindness has no boundaries, every person who interacts with you effectively gets to practice this principle repeatedly. They ask for more, knowing you are likely to give it because you have not defined what is acceptable. The danger is subtle and cumulative. You may feel good in the moment. The immediate rush of helping someone is satisfying. It reinforces the image of yourself as a caring, good-hearted individual. But over time, repeated exploitation of that goodwill erodes your sense of self. You begin to feel resentment, frustration, and a kind of exhaustion that is not easily named. The paradox of kindness without boundaries is that while you intend to uplift others, in many cases, it lifts them at your expense. Respect is earned, not assumed, and when you do not assert the parameters of your kindness, respect is rarely granted. Instead, what fills the void is expectation, and expectations without limits quickly turn into entitlement. People begin to assume that because you are kind once, you will always be kind, that your compassion is infinite, that your ability to tolerate their demands is unlimited, and when your human limits inevitably emerge. Because you are human, after all, there can be backlash. People may feel slighted, not because of the reality that you have limits, but because they have become accustomed to a version of you that is always giving, always available, and always accommodating. Boundaries are the invisible architecture that supports healthy kindness. They define the scope and the reach of your generosity so that it does not become a doorway for disrespect. When you place boundaries around your kindness, you are communicating clearly to the world that while you are willing to give, you are not willing to be exploited, that you are willing to help, but not at the cost of your dignity or well-being. Setting boundaries does not diminish the moral or ethical value of your kindness. On the contrary, it enhances it because it demonstrates that your actions are deliberate, intentional, and conscious. They are not reactive, nor are they passive. When you act with intention, people begin to recognize that your kindness is a choice, not an obligation. And when kindness is a choice rather than a default, it carries weight. People recognize the value because they understand that it is not given indiscriminately. In contrast, indiscriminate kindness can sometimes dilute its meaning. If you are always bending to the needs of others without any reflection on what is reasonable, your acts of generosity can be taken for granted. They can become background noise, expected rather than appreciated. Human behavior is often shaped by reinforcement. If someone receives kindness without seeing the boundaries or limits of that kindness, the reinforcement becomes skewed. They are rewarded for taking, and you, despite the goodness of your intentions, are trained into a pattern of giving without pause. Over time, this becomes a cycle that is difficult to break. Moreover, the lack of boundaries in kindness affects not only how others perceive you, but also how you perceive yourself. You may begin to internalize the belief that your value lies solely in what you do for others. That if you are not constantly giving, constantly accommodating, constantly sacrificing, then you are somehow less worthy. This is a dangerous path because it ties self-esteem and self-worth to external validation. When respect is tied to your availability rather than your integrity, you are setting yourself up for chronic disappointment and disillusionment. You cannot control how others perceive your actions, but you can control the framework within which you offer them. Boundaries act as that framework. They are the blueprint that ensures kindness remains a strength, not a vulnerability. They are the lines you draw to protect your energy, your time, and your mental clarity. When you learn to assert boundaries with kindness, you shift the dynamic entirely. People start to see your generosity not as an inexhaustible resource, but as something precious, something to be honored. Respect naturally follows when people recognize that your kindness has limits, that it is not a given, but a gift that is offered thoughtfully. There is also a practical aspect to this. Unbounded kindness leads to burnout. Emotional, mental, and even physical exhaustion can result when you continually give without restraint. It's not sustainable. Boundaries ensure sustainability. They allow you to continue being kind without sacrificing your well-being. They allow you to be present for the people who matter most without being drained by those who take advantage. And the most important truth is this: kindness with boundaries is more powerful than kindness without. It commands attention, demands respect, and cultivates genuine gratitude. People respect what is rare, what is deliberate, and what is intentional. When kindness has no boundaries, it risks becoming ordinary, unnoticed, and unappreciated. But when it is tempered with limits, it becomes a force that shapes interactions, sets standards, and elevates relationships. It teaches others how to treat you, and it teaches you how to honor yourself. Every act of kindness without boundaries carries the risk of being misinterpreted, exploited, and disrespected, but every act of kindness with clear boundaries reinforces value, integrity, and self-respect. Boundaries are not a betrayal of kindness. They are its protector, its amplifier, its assurance that your generosity does not diminish your dignity and that your heart, while open, is not endlessly at the mercy of those who do not understand its worth. People often mistake empathy for weakness. This is one of the most common misunderstandings in human interactions, and it is at the heart of why kind-hearted individuals are often disrespected. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, to step into someone else's emotional shoes and see the world through their eyes. It is a remarkable trait, one that fosters connection, compassion, and understanding. Yet, in a society that often values assertiveness, toughness, and self-preservation above all else, empathy can be misread as a deficiency rather than a strength. When someone displays empathy, they are showing vulnerability. They are revealing that they are capable of feeling deeply, of being affected by the struggles, emotions, and experiences of others. This vulnerability can be mistaken for fragility. People may assume that because you care, because you feel, because you listen, you are unable to defend yourself or that you will not stand up when challenged. This assumption is not only false, but it is dangerous because it positions empathetic individuals in a space where they are at risk of exploitation. The reality is that empathy is not weakness, it is a profound form of intelligence. It allows you to navigate complex social landscapes, to understand motivations, and to respond in ways that are thoughtful, measured, and effective. But when people fail to recognize the strength behind empathy, they see only what they perceive as softness, and they may take advantage of it. In many cases, the mistake arises from cultural conditioning. From a young age, many individuals are taught that showing emotion, concern, or care is a sign of vulnerability, not strength. They learn to associate power with stoicism, authority with emotional detachment, and leadership with a certain hardness of character. Consequently, when they encounter someone who operates from empathy, they misinterpret the signals. They think this person will be easy to manipulate, or they will not assert themselves when challenged, or they will prioritize others over their own interests. None of these assumptions are true reflections of the empathetic person's character. But perception often dictates behavior. People respond to what they believe, not necessarily what is true. And when empathy is mistaken for weakness, the empathetic individual becomes a target, not because they have done anything wrong, but because their true strength is invisible to those who do not understand it. The danger lies not in empathy itself, but in the lack of recognition for its power. Empathy requires boundaries, discernment, and courage. It is not simply feeling what others feel, it is also making deliberate choices about how to respond, when to act, and when to protect yourself. Without these boundaries, empathetic individuals are exposed to emotional drain, manipulation, and disrespect. Over time, they may feel frustrated, exploited, and undervalued as their intentions are continually misread. Furthermore, empathy without boundaries can create patterns in relationships that are difficult to break. People may come to rely on your emotional availability, assuming that you will always be there to comfort, to understand, and to forgive. This can result in one-sided dynamics where your feelings and needs are secondary to everyone else's. Even in professional settings, empathy can be misunderstood. Leaders who show compassion and understanding may be labeled as indecisive or weak, while coworkers may push boundaries, expecting tolerance for unreasonable demands or criticism. This misperception undermines respect and can hinder the very relationships empathy is meant to strengthen. But the truth remains, empathy is a skill, a strength, and a source of profound resilience. It allows you to connect deeply, to inspire trust, and to influence others positively. The key is to pair empathy with self-awareness and boundaries. By understanding your own limits, protecting your emotional energy, and communicating clearly what is acceptable, you ensure that empathy does not become a liability. Empathy with discernment is a shield, not a weakness. It signals to others that while you are compassionate, you are not a doormat. You can care deeply without being exploited. You can listen, understand, and support without sacrificing your dignity or well-being. People often mistake empathy for weakness because they fail to see the courage it takes to feel, to care, and to respond thoughtfully in a world that frequently rewards indifference. True empathy is not passive, it is active. It involves making conscious choices, taking responsibility for your own boundaries, and asserting your needs while honoring the feelings of others. When you operate from this empowered form of empathy, respect naturally follows. People recognize that your understanding is not a vulnerability to be exploited, but a strength to be acknowledged. In essence, empathy is a superpower misunderstood by those who view the world through a lens of self-interest. Misinterpretation is inevitable when kindness and understanding are abundant and unchecked. But when empathy is wielded with awareness, intentionality, and boundaries, it becomes one of the most potent tools for commanding respect, fostering authentic relationships, and navigating a world that often confuses sensitivity with weakness. Those who misread your empathy will test it, push against it, and even try to take advantage of it. But the disciplined, self-aware, and conscious empathetic individual remains untouchable in the ways that truly matter because their power is not in hardness or aggression, but in the deliberate, courageous, and compassionate application of understanding, discernment, and emotional intelligence. Generosity can be exploited by those with selfish intentions. Generosity is one of the most beautiful qualities a person can possess. It is the willingness to give, to share, to contribute not because you are asked, but because you want to make a positive difference in someone's life. True generosity comes from a place of abundance, not obligation. It is not calculated or transactional, and it flows naturally from a heart that values connection, care, and support. Yet, as noble as generosity is, it carries an inherent risk when it meets the selfish intentions of others. Human nature is complex. While many people genuinely appreciate and reciprocate kindness, there are also individuals who operate primarily out of self-interest. These individuals recognize generosity not as a virtue, but as an opportunity. They see the open hand, the giving spirit, the readiness to help, and they perceive it as a resource to be used, leveraged, or drained. It is not a reflection of your worth or your intentions, but rather a reflection of their character. When generosity is met with selfishness, the dynamic between giver and taker becomes unbalanced. Over time, the generous person may find that their good intentions are being exploited, that their time, energy, or resources are being consumed without acknowledgement, gratitude, or reciprocity. This exploitation often starts subtly. The first request seems reasonable, the second may stretch the giver a little, and soon there is a pattern where the generous individual is giving more than they intended, while the selfish person grows accustomed to receiving without contributing. This imbalance can escalate quickly if it is not addressed. One of the reasons generosity is so often exploited is that giving feels good. It activates parts of the brain associated with reward, satisfaction, and social bonding. Each act of giving can produce a small high, a sense of purpose and connection, and this neurological feedback can make it difficult for generous individuals to recognize when they are being taken advantage of. They continue to give, even in situations where restraint would be wiser. Selfish individuals, on the other hand, are acutely aware of this dynamic. They know how to push the boundaries, how to appeal to emotions, how to elicit a sense of obligation or guilt, and they exploit it with precision. This creates a scenario where generosity, a gift meant to uplift, becomes a tool for manipulation. Generosity without discernment is particularly vulnerable. When the giver does not set clear boundaries or does not recognize the patterns of exploitation, they become an open target. They may be asked for favors repeatedly, expected to solve problems that are not theirs, or pressured to give more than is healthy. And because generosity is often tied to identity, people see themselves as good. When they give, they may feel compelled to continue even when it is harmful. There is also a psychological phenomenon at play here called the foot in the door effect. Selfish individuals often start by asking for small favors, knowing that once a person agrees to one request, they are more likely to agree to subsequent, larger requests. Generosity without boundaries becomes the perfect environment for this manipulation to thrive. Over time, the generous individual may feel drained, resentful, or undervalued, even though their original intention was pure and selfless. The exploitation of generosity is not always obvious. Sometimes it is subtle, expressed through micro moments of taking advantage. People consistently asking for help, but never offering support, consistently borrowing, but never returning, consistently demanding attention, but never offering reciprocity. These small instances accumulate and gradually erode the giver's sense of balance and self-worth. To protect against this, generosity must be paired with awareness and boundaries. Awareness means understanding human nature, recognizing that not everyone operates from the same ethical or moral framework, and accepting that some individuals may exploit your kindness. Boundaries mean defining the scope of what you will give, how much you are willing to invest, and under what circumstances. Together, awareness and boundaries transform generosity from a vulnerability into a strength. They ensure that your giving is intentional rather than reactive, deliberate rather than exploited. Generosity, when carefully managed, signals value, intentionality, and self-respect. It communicates that you give because you choose to, not because you are compelled by guilt, pressure, or manipulation. It teaches others how to treat you, and it ensures that your kindness is honored rather than abused. The most generous people are not those who give indiscriminately, but those who give with intention and discernment. They understand the difference between helping and enabling, between uplifting and being drained. They know that their time, energy, and resources are finite, and they protect these gifts with the same care they offer to others. Without this understanding, generosity can quickly become a liability. Selfish individuals will continue to exploit it, and the generous person may feel increasingly frustrated, disillusioned, and resentful. But with awareness, boundaries, and discernment, generosity becomes a powerful tool for creating meaningful connections, fostering respect, and elevating both the giver and the receiver. In essence, generosity is a force that can transform lives, but only when it is paired with the wisdom to protect it from exploitation. Those who fail to do so risk becoming a target, not because their hearts are weak, but because their openness is misunderstood, misused, or taken for granted. True generosity is not diminished by setting limits. On the contrary, it is enhanced because it is deliberate, respected, and sustainable. When you combine the desire to give with the intelligence to discern, you create a dynamic where generosity is a strength, not a vulnerability, and where selfish intentions are acknowledged, managed, and ultimately rendered powerless against the integrity of your giving nature. True respect comes when kindness is paired with strength. Respect is not automatically granted simply because you are kind, generous, or empathetic. It is earned, cultivated, and reinforced by the way you carry yourself, the boundaries you set, and the consistency with which you uphold your principles. Kindness, by itself, is admirable, but it can be misinterpreted, taken for granted, or even exploited if it is not coupled with a demonstration of strength. Strength, in this context, does not mean aggression, dominance, or intimidation. It is not about overpowering others or asserting superiority. True strength is a quiet, unwavering form of power that manifests through self-awareness, discipline, resilience, and the ability to stand firm in your values while remaining compassionate. When kindness is paired with strength, it transforms from a passive attribute into an active force. People begin to recognize that your generosity, empathy, and understanding are deliberate choices, not signs of weakness or passivity. This awareness fundamentally changes the dynamics of human interaction. Others no longer assume that they can take advantage of your good nature. They understand that while you are capable of giving, you are equally capable of standing your ground, asserting boundaries, and protecting your dignity. Strength amplifies kindness because it creates a framework in which it can be expressed safely and effectively. Without strength, kindness is vulnerable to exploitation, misinterpretation, and disrespect. With strength, kindness becomes intentional, commanding, and influential. Consider the way human behavior responds to signals of power and vulnerability. Individuals instinctively test boundaries, probe for weaknesses, and push limits to see how much they can gain. If kindness is offered without strength, it is perceived as a gap to be exploited. If kindness is offered with strength, it is perceived as a conscious, controlled choice that demands recognition and respect. Strength also allows you to enforce consistency. Consistency is crucial in cultivating respect because people respect what is predictable and reliable in its principles. When your kindness is paired with strength, others learn that your generosity is not erratic or unconditional in a way that invites abuse. They understand that you are reliable in your values and principles, and this reliability fosters trust, admiration, and genuine respect. Furthermore, strength provides the courage to say no when necessary. The ability to decline requests, protect your time, and refuse unreasonable demands is a direct demonstration of strength. It shows that your kindness is not a license for exploitation, but a conscious choice that respects both yourself and others. The balance of kindness and strength is what sets apart individuals who are genuinely respected from those who are only liked superficially. Liking can be fleeting and conditional, respect endures, and is grounded in recognition of both moral character and personal power. People respect those who are kind, yes, but only when they also perceive that kindness as deliberate, intentional, and paired with the capacity to protect oneself. Strength also allows for emotional resilience. Kindness often involves vulnerability, and vulnerability can invite emotional risk. When paired with strength, vulnerability does not equate to helplessness. Instead, it becomes a point of authenticity that others recognize as courageous. People learn to approach you with sincerity rather than manipulation, knowing that your kindness is genuine but not to be taken lightly. Another critical aspect of pairing kindness with strength is the ability to inspire rather than simply please. True leaders, mentors, and influencers demonstrate that kindness does not compromise authority or integrity. When you show that compassion and boundaries coexist, that empathy and assertiveness coexist, others are inspired to emulate these qualities. This inspires respect on a deeper, more sustainable level. Moreover, pairing kindness with strength changes the internal narrative of self-worth. Instead of feeling guilty for asserting boundaries, limiting overcommitment, or prioritizing your own well-being, you recognize that these actions enhance the quality of your kindness. You give from a place of abundance, control, and clarity, which ensures that your generosity is impactful and not depleted by exploitation. In essence, strength is the protective armor around the heart of kindness. It does not diminish your generosity or empathy. It ensures that these qualities are recognized, valued, and respected. Without strength, kindness risks becoming a liability, leaving you open to disrespect, manipulation, and exhaustion. With strength, kindness becomes a deliberate, empowering choice that commands honor and acknowledgement. It is in this pairing that true human respect emerges, not from fear, intimidation, or obligation, but from recognition of both moral integrity and the capacity to uphold it consistently. People intuitively sense when kindness is authentic yet firm, when generosity is thoughtful yet protected, when empathy is sincere yet bounded. This combination creates a magnetic form of respect that is resilient, lasting, and meaningful. In every interaction, every decision, every relationship. The presence of strength alongside kindness communicates a simple but profound truth. You are a person of value, integrity, and purpose. You are generous because you choose to be, not because you are compelled. You are empathetic because it reflects who you are, not because it leaves you defenseless. You are kind, but you are never weak. The synergy of kindness and strength transforms human dynamics, turning potential exploitation into mutual respect, misinterpretation into admiration, and superficial liking into deep, unwavering honor. This is the essence of why respect follows those who balance kindness with strength, and why the world naturally responds with acknowledgement, trust, and honor when these qualities coexist within a person.